Thanks for joining us today on CCnDoc Talk, where we talk about everything under the sun. You never know quite what you're going to get, but you'll always be entertained. Hello, everyone, and welcome to CCnDoc Talk. Today we are talking about selfishness, and we actually have been a little selfish the last couple of weeks because we took some time off from podcasting so that I could recover from my final CRC surgery. Woo!
Yay! What an exciting moment.
10 months later, finally finished with CRC treatment.
To the day.
10 months to the day, and thankfully cancer-free. So thank you for that. So we did take some time to be a little selfish this last couple of weeks, and to allow my body to recover.
Just the last few weeks?
Well, more than that. So anyway, all of this to say, it made us really start talking about the concept of selfishness and how, when other people accuse you of being selfish, are you really the selfish one, or is it the person accusing you of being selfish that it's actually the selfish one? And we might also talk a little bit about the difference between selfishness and self-love, setting healthy boundaries, and also maybe even the difference between narcissism and selfishness. So
wow. That's
I'm just gonna toss it to Doc over there.
Oh my gosh.
Because she's got the PhD in psychology.
Don't put me on the spot. Those are old memories. No. Well, I think with anything there's a healthy and an unhealthy.
Right.
And selfishness is no different because like stress, right? There's a healthy stress and an unhealthy stress. There's the distress or there's eustress. Yeah. Eustress is healthy stress that kind of gets you pumped up before a public speaking event or something, or a sporting thing. It's kind of like, oh yeah, it's that. But a distress is like, that's not good for you.
Yeah,
it's a cortisol release that really just is not good for your body and your health.
Distress causes dis-ease.
Yes. Dis-ease. And then so I really had to think long and hard about selfishness because I was accused of being selfish by somebody who I viewed as being incredibly selfish one time. And I was shocked by that. Absolutely shocked by that. And I'm like, I am the most giving, loving person that I know. I mean, I will move out of my main house and move to the basement to let somebody, I used to, not anymore. But when somebody accused me of being selfish, when they were the selfish one, I'm like, whoa, I really have to take a look at that. So if somebody is really the selfish one because they're getting all of their needs met, and then you try to get some of your needs met, are you the selfish one?
Right. It's such a conundrum, and it's really easy, the self-talk then, and the self-talk around that. And because society teaches us that being selfish in any way, shape, or form is bad, right? Or at least society used to teach us that. I don't know, these days it seems like there's a whole lot of selfish people walking around, but and not the good kind of selfish.
Well, that's entitlement. That's a different story.
Right. And we'll talk about that in a moment. But, I think societally, I think as women, I think also even from a religious perspective, we are taught that, any level of selfishness is bad. So we're always taught that we have to be selfless. So then the moment that we choose to set a boundary, the moment that we choose to protect ourselves or to even make time for ourselves at the exclusion of others, we immediately then feel guilty.
So when is it healthy and when is it not healthy?
Right. So great. When is it healthy and when is it not healthy?
I think if you're putting a boundary around something because you're protecting your energy and protecting yourself.
Or your mental health.
Or your mental health, because boundaries sometimes are love.
Right.
So that tough love. You put up a boundary, it's tough love. That is love.
Well, but it's
also
self-love.
You have to put a boundary, but it's self-love.
Putting a boundary up because, something impacts your mental health negatively, that's self-love.
That's self-love.
That's important.
And yet, when it starts to impact others in a negative way, or, without it being communicated, what's happening, right? So you and I are going to hole up for a little bit because of surgery, but we don't tell people why all of a sudden we've gone off the radar and people are going, huh? We're being the selfish one. But if we communicate what's going on,
right,
it's not perceived as unhealthy because we are not being disrespectful to those that it's impacting.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I see that. I see that. And then what about situations like, okay, so we talked about what's the difference between being selfish and being a narcissist?
Wow. Narcissism comes from somebody who has had their trust violated at an early age, usually from an adult figure, whether it's a parent or a grandparent or something like that. And so the only person that the narcissist can trust is themselves.
Okay.
And so,
and that's not true in every case, but in some cases.
It's
right?
not true in every, but
trauma,
for the most part, yeah, there's some
piece,
sort of a major event at a very early age. Trauma that all of a sudden it's like, I now need to protect myself. I'm going to. And
at the exclusion of everybody else, though, because narcissists are ridiculously selfish.
Right, and so that's then rooted in trust.
Okay.
And so they don't trust anybody else. So the only person I can trust is myself.
It still doesn't make them good people, by the way.
Yeah, no. But they can come across as very selfish because they are going to protect. They're probably the ultimate in taking care of themselves.
Right.
So they become incredibly selfish because they don't trust anybody else.
Right.
And
a few people and even a few very public figures come to mind in terms of that behavior, and certainly you can see the consequences of that behavior on others for sure. Because I think that's the thing. Like narcissists, the consequence of narcissistic behavior toward on other people, the consequences are can be devastating.
Oh, it's huge because again, they are only looking at things through one filter. Yeah. And that's a very narrow one, and it's their own,
right?
You know, and it's not a broader perspective. They don't live with the whole as the greater than the sum of its parts in mind.
It's all about me. The world revolves around me.
Definitely does. Absolutely.
Okay, and then what about? Okay, so we talked a little bit about like it does seem like we're living in a time where selfishness reigns, and I don't mean the enlightened self-love, setting healthy boundaries kind of selfishness. I mean the true selfishness of, you know, I don't care what happens to you. I am going to take care of me and I'm going to do what I want to do and to hell with you. But you have an opinion on that.
I do. I think there's where I mentioned the word entitlement, and entitlement really comes in where you put your rights ahead of your responsibilities. I have a right to do this. I have a right, I have a right to, I'm just going to put it, not be vaccinated. Or I have a right to go to this event while I'm sick, or get on this plane without a mask on, or I have a right to that. But you also have a responsibility. So entitlement is where you put that right ahead of the responsibility. You also have a responsibility to others. You have a responsibility to yourself. You have a responsibility to others. And so, getting outside that selfish perspective, that entitled perspective, and saying, okay, I also can and should be responsible to others. You don't want to get other people sick. You also want to take care of this earth, the society, the climate change, whatever it is. We have a responsibility larger than ourselves. Right. And so when we go back to what is being healthy as a selfish person, that's self-love, and maybe it is all rooted in love. Right? If I look at things through love and compassion, then from a selfish perspective, I may not go to an event because I love you as much as I love myself and I'm not feeling well. Right. And so I do things out of love and compassion, out of entitlement. And I think that's a healthy sort of selfish.
So how do we, others, etc., strike a balance between, self-love and selfishness, and how do we then, what is the self-talk that we should be using so that we don't have that guilt factor? Because guilt is a useless emotion, but lots of people have it.
Oh, absolutely. Guilt is
I mean, I know so many people who do things solely out of guilt and a sense of responsibility. It's not there are lots of things that, and there are lots of things that we all do in this life that we don't necessarily love to do. Yeah. But to operate from a sense of responsibility and guilt to, in doing things and taking care of others.
Yeah, in excess. Right now you're being so responsible to others at the expense of yourself.
Exactly.
I'm going to go back to, things being rooted in love and compassion. If I go to something, it's because I want to go. It's going to feed my soul. And I get a chance to bring really good energy to other people. And I'm in a healthy place that I can do that. But I used to, when I was married, and I used to drag my ex to a man. Yes.
You are married now.
Yeah, that's true. I was married to a man. Yes. Thanks for clarifying that one for me. I was a little misunderstood, but now that you cleared it up.
And I felt like sure you didn't miss something along between all the all the marriages we did at gay pride events and everything. I just wanted to make sure you didn't miss that fact. We actually are married and legally, at least for now.
I used to feel like I was dragging my ex to events, and he would say those things too. And I remember,
he did say not long ago, he goes, I'm so glad you have Cindy to drag these things to now.
I have to drag around the world with you and drag to these events with you. And I was like, really? Was I dragging you to these events? So I think never drag somebody to something they don't want to go to, because how miserable for everybody. And I guess in that case, if he was being selfish, saying, I really don't want to go to this event, and I was being selfish and saying, no, you're going to go, and then I drag him there, and he makes it miserable for everyone, geez, that's worse, right? So let him be selfish and stay home and be on the couch. I get to be selfish, but don't make me feel guilty for going.
Right.
I get to go and have a good time, and I'll be home whenever the fuck I want to get home, and you can't question it because you didn't go with, and I'll let you know, but out of respect, I can check in. Hey, I'm having a good time, I'm going to stay longer.
Right.
So there's no surprises.
Right. Well, and you and I, most people who know us know that we are literally joined at the hip. I mean, we're happily codependent. I
am so codependent. Are you kidding?
Happily codependent. I mean, we do everything together. We do everything together, almost everything. But in the times when we don't do everything together. So, for instance,
scale of 1 to 10.
I'm just going to bring up your outside projects. Like, sometimes I'm into that, sometimes I'm not. And when I'm not, I'm like, okay, this is an opportunity for me to have my little alone time inside, and you can go out and play and, chop wood and do whatever. But we don't ever feel bad about that. I mean, it's like, you don't make me feel guilty for not helping you work outside, and I don't make you feel guilty for not being in here, setting up a backup to the backup to the backup of our computer system, or publishing a podcast, for instance. So,
absolutely. As soon as we're done, I'm off and running. And
you're out, and I'm going to publish the podcast.
And don't make me feel guilty about it.
Right, because we each have our... And so even though we spend a lot of time truly joined at the hip, we also do have moments where we spend time
explain. Here's the difference, right? When you come and you do stuff with me outside, like we went to do the wood chipping, and you come out to do the wood chipping with me, and you turn it into a game. You're like putting the branch in the air like Superwoman, woohoo! And then you're like catapulting it like a javelin throw into the wood chipper and dancing around, and you're just making so much fun out of it, And I'm like, why wouldn't I want you to do that with me? Of course. When I go out there by myself, I'm like on a mission to get through this entire huge pile. So I'm like, focus, right? So it's different dynamic when you're with and when you're not.
I do feel the need to object slightly. Like, we still get a lot done when I'm out there.
But in case of point, when you're on the computer and I'm there with you, I slow you down. Right? You don't get as much done.
That is true.
So
to a great degree. No, man.
So we enjoy the other person being there because we're learning from one another, we're doing stuff together. Right. But when we really, what does it go? If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to have fun or whatever it is, go with others. There's some other saying that I just botched, but you get the point.
I just appreciate, and do you realize you just actually referred to me as the fun one? So that's like a huge compliment.
Gosh, I used to be smart and fun, and now I've had to give up both of those titles. So now I'm just busy doing everything.
You are still smart and fun.
Thanks.
And you're choosing to be busy doing everything, even though you're retired. But anyway, back to selfishness. So
me being selfish is I need to go outside, but that also feeds my energy.
Right. And so is it selfish or is it self-love? I think it's self-love. Or maybe it's just a matter of reframing the word selfish. Maybe we should stop looking at the word selfish as a bad word.
And maybe it should be self.
Looking at it as a good word, and so let's just change the definition. Selfish is no longer a bad word. It's okay to be selfish.
Well, what you need to do is, instead of call it selfish, it's self-love.
Exactly.
Right now I'm doing some self-love. Okay, I want to come back to scale to 1 to 10.
Oh, yes, I do want to come back to that. I just wanted to add one thing to that. But I think back to your point, communicate.
Communicate,
absolutely. You got to communicate. Like, don't just
Absolutely.
go off on your own and do your own thing. And then somebody's like, well, where the hell were you? I was waiting.
Right. I mean, if I am going to go outside and do the wood chipping for 3 or 4 hours, at least let you know.
Exactly.
And then let you. But we also then communicate. I'm like, all right, I'm going to be out there for a while. I have lots of water with me. I have safety stuff. If I get in trouble, I have a whistle. So leave a little window open in case a bear comes and attacks me or whatever, or a mountain lion jumps on me and I scream loud enough you can come find me. Anyhow, but
Or the bobcat that
or
was
what?
at the water trough last night.
Or I will, but the other times I say, and you're like, what about food? And I'm like, well, if you're going to be in the kitchen and you make something, yeah, let me know and I'll happy to come in. And other times I come in and when you're sucked in, I'll just say, hey, you're ready to eat something. So I think, communicate out of respect.
Well, and the other thing is I notice sometimes you come in at intervals and you'll say, hey, I have probably an hour left out there, but I know you wanted to do X, Y, and Z. So should we do X, Y, and Z now so it's off your plate? Or should I go back out and do my thing for an hour? And usually I'm in the middle of something. So I'm like, you go back out and do your thing for an hour, which usually ends up being more like an hour and a half or 2. And then, so when you come back in, then we'll do that. But again, it all comes back to communication again.
Yeah.
All right. So let's talk about 1 to 10.
1 to 10. This comes back to if somebody does or doesn't want to go do something. All right, so how much do you want to go outside and stack the wood with me today? Scale of 1 to 10. 10 is Yahoo, let's go do this. 1 is hell no.
Well, considering
we have 3 levels of no.
Considering that I'm still not allowed to lift more than 10 pounds, I'm gonna say a 2. Okay. Actually, no, I'll say a 4 because I wouldn't mind it, but I'm not allowed.
Okay.
So,
all right.
Okay.
And so to me, stacking wood today is like a 5. I just, no, I don't have it.
Because you've been doing it for days.
Right. Yeah. And so we ask on a scale of 1 to 10, if either person answers as a 1 or 2, they really don't want to do it. But you have independent judgment, independent vote in what's been proposed as an activity.
And you can do this in families. It's not just between couples. Like every person in the family can give their ranking. And so how do we know, like, what if you're a 9 or a 10 and I'm a 6 or a 7?
If I'm a 9 or a 10, it tells you I really want to do this, and you're a 6 or a 7, then you can decide, do you want to go because you want out of respect and love for me, or do you want to just say, you know what, I really don't want to go, but I know you really do, go do it. If you're comfortable doing this by yourself, go do it.
Yeah.
But not stop me from doing it because I really want to go do this.
Right.
I haven't said I'm a scale of 9 to 10 of bringing a puppy home because then there needs to have a bigger conversation.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Anything that's a long-term impact.
Right.
But we've saved hundreds and hundreds of dollars on things about, not going on a trip somewhere or not going into a concert or something like that, where everybody gets to say, do you really want to go into this thing?
Right. We've done this with groups before.
And I think we shared that on a different podcast that, independent judgment, everybody was a 5 or a 6 and it was a $100 ticket and we all decided not to go in. I mean, some still did, but anyway, moving on.
Yeah, totally. So, and I agree with that.
But we do this with your mom a lot.
We do because, well, and it's actually really helpful for people who have trouble making decisions, which sometimes when you're presented with so many options, like it can be hard to sort through them. So you can 1 to 10 each option and then ultimately decide how, what direction to go. So I think we've always said if anybody is over a 7, then you have to strongly consider it.
I think it's 8. But anyway, it doesn't matter.
Well, 8 would be over 7.
Well, that's true. Over 7. Well, semantics. Here we go again. Yes, if it's 8, 9, or a 10, somebody really wants to do it.
You made me snort.
Our next podcast is going to be on laughing.
Oh, God.
Oh, my goodness. So,
right.
8, 9, or 10s, consider it strongly. 1s or 2s, nah, don't do it. 5,
If it's in the middle, then it might require a little bit more discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is great to do on vacation, too. Who wants to go to the water park? And ask, and everybody gets their independent.
Ooh, can I go down that really steep one that's at the 90-degree angle so I could get a wedgie?
Perfect.
That's fun.
I think you should.
I always like using my butt cheeks as my brake.
I think we've segued way off into a different thing. Okay, what's your final, if you had a word of advice for people who are really struggling to try to add to add more healthy boundaries or a little bit of selfishness or a little bit of self-love in their lives, what's your advice?
I think coming out of this whole COVID situation, we have to reevaluate some of the things that we do and the people we spend time with. And if they don't feed your soul, then it's not selfish to start to weed them out of your world. It's self-love to start doing that. And
like if they never gave you energy to start with and they sucked you dry whenever you saw them, now might be the opportunity to say, well, maybe you're not.
But maybe your spouse loves to spend time with that person. Guess what? Go have at it, you know? But it's okay. You know, you're not making excuses for the other person. It's just, this is just the way it is. It's self-love, not selfish.
Well, and I can say for us right now, you know, we've been told that until I'm back to 100%, we still have to be very careful. And so we are still, and it wasn't easy for us necessarily at first, you know, because we were always probably the more COVID safe people in our, in our, you know, group of our community. So we were always the more COVID safe. And then, you know, and then as other people started being able to back off more, then I got diagnosed. So we started being even more cautious. But
our cautiousness is now, it's not as much COVID focused as it is cancer focused. We are still being very cautious for those reasons.
Because we've been told that even though I'm now cancer free, until I'm 100%, we still need to be very careful. So bottom line is, it can look like selfishness when you say to somebody, hey, if we're going to spend time with you, you need to COVID test and please be willing to wear a mask. But most people have been very accommodating of that. And so what I will say, and this is my piece of advice, this is my long way of getting to my piece of advice.
I was going to say, wait a minute.
Where am I going with this? My long way of getting to my piece of advice is, don't be afraid to set the boundary, because the other person can always say no. I'm not going to be offended if somebody says, nope, I don't feel like COVID testing, and nope, I'm not going to wear a mask.
Then we'll see you
around
later.
you, and I'm like,
we'll see you a different decade.
I'll see you in a couple of years. I'll be like, I'm not going to be offended by that, but you can't be offended if I say, okay, well then I won't see you.
My turning point to continue to have the boundaries with and for you is, there was a study that said anybody who has or has had
past tense
CRC, colorectal cancer, is highly susceptible to more severe symptoms
from COVID,
when they catch something, especially COVID.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, then we just need to stay very focused.
Right.
And it makes it easy because that's self-love. And for me, it's self-love for you.
Right. Well, it's just love for me. But anyway, so going back to that my advice, which is, you can always set the boundary. You just have to be okay if somebody else doesn't want to adhere to the boundary, and be okay with walking away from that. And for instance, I'm not going to put myself in a compromised situation because somebody else isn't willing to accept the boundary. I'm just going to take a step back and say, I'm fine with that, but it may mean that I don't see you for a couple of years.
I think to have your head, your heart, and your gut all in alignment on your decisions and what you're doing. And when it's not, there's cognitive dissonance, right? When you're doing something that mentally or physically, you're kind of betraying yourself because you're doing it, but you shouldn't be doing it, or there's something in you that's going, this isn't right. Or not saying something.
Listen.
To doing things where your head, your gut, and your heart are all in alignment, that is a beautiful place to be. And
absolutely,
that's self-compassion.
And when you know in your heart that you can't be in a situation because it's not good for your mental health, or it's not good for your stress level, or it's not, I'm talking, it could be a job, it could be a family situation, it could be anything. When you know that it's bad for you, then what you also need to look at is, it really is okay to set a boundary, to risk conflict, because that's about loving yourself. So many times we worry about taking care of everybody else, and we always put ourselves last. And I think all we're saying is, sometimes it's really okay to put yourself first, especially when your mental health or your stress level or your physical health are part of the equation.
Well, and that's another thing. There's, we talked about everything has a good and a bad side, right? So conflict actually, and anger are motivators. They are opportunity for change.
Right.
So when you have anger, in Chinese cultures, anger is a motivator to action. And in terms of conflict actually is a motivator for action.
Right.
And so conflict isn't bad.
Well, and if you
it's anyway, motivation for change.
Right. And if you don't risk the conflict, then sometimes it's tantamount to enabling, which actually can ultimately make the problem worse. So, by enabling others because we're afraid of conflict, right?
Yeah, ignoring things is enabling.
So bottom line is, I think we should reframe the word selfish so that it's no longer a bad word.
Yeah.
And also recognize that it's okay to have healthy boundaries. It is also okay to look at the greater good sometimes and recognize that being a part of a community sometimes means that, we sacrifice a little, we give and take, and we find a happy medium.
I think that was a great summary of what we just stated. And on that, I'm going to be selfish and go outside. Goodbye.
All right. See you later. I'm going to go post this podcast.
Not kidding.
Y'all have a great day. Thanks for tuning in to CCnDoc Talk. We'd love for you to follow us on social media at CCnDoc. That's CCnDoc. And you can visit our website at CCnDoc.com. We also take monthly donations to support this broadcast if you're so inclined. We'd love to hear your comments, suggestions, and questions, and we'll do our best to respond. Thanks, and have a fantabulous day.